Welcome to the Tuesday Huddle, a brief reflection on Sunday's message at Walnut Hill Church in Lexington, Kentucky. Each week, we revisit the heart of the sermon and consider how God's Word meets us in the days ahead. Thanks for listening. Let's continue the conversation.
Well, hello there, and it's Monday, it's almost noon, and welcome to Walnut Hill. My name is Sean Barkley. I'm hosting this podcast with my friend and colleague, Jessica.
Yes, you're going to be hearing from us this day, but on hopefully future Sundays, we will have some guests on for you to hear.
Are you saying you don't want to do this any longer? Is that why?
No, I always think it's good to vary it with
Yep.
different opinions, perspectives. I think people might get bored of me, to be honest.
What about getting bored? Why don't you do it with someone else too
No.
sometime?
No, because you have the knowledge.
Right.
So-
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, hopefully wherever you are, you're having a wonderful Monday. It's the 23rd of February.
Can't
A week from
believe it.
today, we're into March.
Yep, it's
So-
coming. Easter's coming.
It is. Snowy day here in the Bluegrass. Hopefully wherever you are, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful here. It's just cold. So anyway, if you haven't yet worshiped with us at Walnut Hill, if you'll go to our church website, you can do so there, or you can go to our church Facebook page and worship with us and get back with this video, or audio, I should say. If you have already worshiped, let's get into it. So we're in John chapter 10. We're going to look at the first 10 verses, and we are in a new series on the I am statements of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So is this something that you've spent a lot of time thinking about before, read them a lot, or is this going to be sort of plowing new ground for you?
The I am statements themselves, the specific ones, I've known some of them, but all of them together will be new. I think it's really interesting though, because I was listening to someone talk about how we kind of look at Jesus now. And it's kind of like two ways. We either see him as kind of a hippie, like everyone just love each other, or we kind of look at him as like, just this guy that showed up and did what he did. And so it's really interesting to have him just, tell us point blank who he is.
Yeah. So how would you say you look at him now? Because I do read on like social media and different platforms and forums where he's kind of like our buddy.
Yeah.
He's kind of the dude you give a little fist bump to, and then you read these I am statements, and it certainly does give a greater picture of who he is.
Before, when I was younger, and I think in my teenage years and maybe in my 20s, I kind of saw him as fist bump Jesus.
Yep.
Can we coin that, fist bump Jesus?
I have never heard that before. Have you?
No, but I think it's a pretty good
Fist bump
description.
Jesus.
Yeah. But now I think, having read more of the Bible than I have in my entire life in the past couple of years, since you've been here, I have to say, I see him more as kind of a serious guy. He's got some things to say, where he is welcoming us into the kingdom of heaven, but there's some rules.
Right.
Yeah. And so I don't think it's fist bump Jesus, but it's more of a serious, not necessarily parental, but it's a different feel.
Yeah. He's the elder brother, kind of the big brother. I mean, he says we're brothers and sisters.
Right.
I resist the temptation to have him be fist bump Jesus because it's so appealing. But he's not fist bumping the Pharisees in these passages. I mean, he is serious. And the I am statements do remind me of the incredible weight of who Jesus Christ is. This is God in human flesh. And so yesterday we started out talking, I wanted to get into that whole notion of being disappointed. You hear a promise and the promise is not delivered upon and you're disappointed. And so I had found that article about immortals. Would you pay $1 million to live? Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because in listening to this man who has
Brian Johnson?
Yeah, I didn't want to say his name because of what I'm about to say next, is literally a vampire. He injected his son's plasma into his body for the benefit of youth. First of all, it didn't work, by the way. That was in a follow-up article, but that's kind of what my aunt would say is cray-cray.
Yes, it is a little cray-cray. And then also, I mean, just the Botox everywhere.
Well, and so that was kind of the question for me as I was listening to that is it immortality or is it vanity? Because if we're going to the point where we're trying to change our physical appearance to no longer appear older, then to me that's less about immortality and more about something you need inside.
Yes, well, the best hair, nail, and skin protocols.
Exactly.
I mean, you can live a very long life with not much hair, which is I'm hoping I can do in my life.
Or very static and frizzy hair in this very cold,
Uh-huh.
dry weather.
Yeah, just the idea is that we do hear promises in our culture, and we invest ourselves in people and institutions and ideas. And what do you do when that disappoints? And so I see Jesus in this passage basically setting it up like, hey, you've got the Pharisees, you've got the world, and these are the promises that are made to you, and then you've got me. And where are you going to place your trust?
Right.
And so that's when he begins to call himself the gate. We talked about, we're not going to talk about Angela Lansbury.
Oh, we have to. I mean, I wrote that down. We have to. If you did not listen to yesterday's sermon and you're listening to this podcast, please do not rob yourself of the opportunity to hear this great story, which was cringeworthy, by the way. When I was listening to it, I felt so uncomfortable for you.
Really? Yep.
I felt so uncomfortable.
Well, see, I didn't, and that story you talk about, I mean, my fraternity brother sitting there, and I was like, I said, I need to say something about WKU, Western Kentucky University.
Yeah.
And I was like, what can I talk about? Where can I fit this in?
That's quick thinking.
Yeah, well, and so, yeah, these two young women, they were messing with me. And part of it was, and now I have great friends from Western. It was the best 4 years of my life, or one of them. I mean, it was wonderful. And I mean, friends down there where I could say, I need a kidney, and I got people I could call.
Yeah.
And, but when I got there, I didn't know anyone, and just was kind of a loner for the first few weeks. Because I couldn't figure out, is it going to be athletics? Is it going to be academics? Is it going to be, campus organizations? Where am I going to kind of plug in? So I was trying to figure all that out.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, these two mean girls spied me.
All I can say is at least they took notice of you, right?
Well,
Because that's
I don't know why. Yeah, but
why'd
anyway,
they pick you out of everyone else?
that's true. But Angela Lansbury, and then they even said, "Don't you know who Angela Lansbury is?" I'm like, "No."
Murder, She Wrote?
I don't even know it was on TV at that point yet. But anyway, if I did have a TV, which I didn't, I would not have been watching Murder, She Wrote.
That's fair.
But again, just the idea of being let down. And I think many of us, maybe all of us, can identify with that feeling of, I have invested so much in this, and it is not delivered on the promise.
Yes, in so many ways.
And I think about the promises that are made to us by our culture. If you do this, you're going to be happy. If you do this, if you have this freedom, you're going to experience greater prosperity and joy and all these things. And what I tried to say yesterday and have found in my own life is, when I have tried to live into those promises, I have often been really disappointed. Just haven't worked out. And so then we moved into just the notion of I am, which is so key and so important. And Jesse, I'm tempted to, I don't want to say that every week, but maybe for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I just need to reiterate, this is the name that God claimed for himself in the Old Testament, and now Jesus is appropriating that to himself. And I think it's just so key for us to understand that these are statements that are establishing the divinity and the identity of Jesus.
Right, which is important because, as you pointed out in the sermon, some people argue that there's nowhere in the Bible that Jesus actually says, I am God, or related to God.
Have you heard that before? Or?
I hadn't, but
no one,
I believe it.
one nodded their head whenever I said that yesterday either. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm just reading. Of course, I get deep into these people who are kind of on the fringes sometimes. But that has been a claim that others have made. Some have even said that he was a figment of Paul's imagination, that Paul was the one who really kind of pushed the narrative that, that he was before creation in existence with God. But then Jesus even, he says before, I can't think of the exact quote, but Jesus does say, before all of this, I am. He establishes that. And so I wanted to make sure we did that. And then also just to note the importance of context, that he is coming out of these two encounters with the Pharisees. And they are being harsh, judgmental, and calloused. And Jesus is proving himself to be compassionate and gracious and merciful. And I think in some ways he's saying, hey guys, you're the thieves trying to rob people of their joy and their security, and I am the gate that's trying to provide them with this safety. So that's kind of where I wanted to go yesterday. So we began in verse 1, as we are wont to do, just kind of working through a text. And I did want our congregation and those who are listening to be mindful of, he says, I tell you the truth. And who is you? And that is, of course, the Pharisees. And, verily, verily, I say unto you, he's basically saying, I'm serious, listen to me. And then he launches into this idea of the sheepfold or the pen. And I had someone from our church, Stephen, who's reading a book about sort of kind of biblical history.
Oh my gosh, I wonder if we're reading the same book,
I don't
because
know.
I'm reading a history of the Bible. Anyways, I'll talk to him about
Dude,
it.
and he sent me some pictures from, screenshots from the book
Yes.
of this city sheepfold. So there's the communal city sheepfold where you got 5 or 6 flocks, which, by the way, I wanted to say yesterday, why is a group of sheep a flock and not a herd?
That is such a good question.
Because I think of flock, I think of winged creatures.
Right.
And herd, I think of the hoof.
That makes sense.
But they're not a herd of sheep, they're a flock of sheep.
One of life's mysteries.
That's what I do at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that everyone else who listens to these podcasts can be resting. I'm thinking about this stuff for everyone.
Exactly.
What is going on? So you've got these multiple flocks in there. And in the country, you've got the sheepfold or the pen that's kind of makeshift. And the shepherd actually lies down in the gate area to provide protection. He becomes a physical human gate. And just these 2 different images, I wanted to make sure our congregation heard that. Is there anything about that that I didn't say clearly that you'd want to hear more about?
I think it was pretty clear.
Okay.
I really liked how you described that the shepherd actually laid down and was there for the gate, because I don't think in the past I've viewed it that way. It was kind of like you've said, we're in a city environment for the most part. We're not used to sheep flocks of sheep.
Flocks of
I was
sheep.
about to say sheep herd. But I also thought it was interesting when they say, but climbs in by another way is a thief. It just reminded me of some ways people have tried to enter heaven in history and how that's worked out, like the medieval indulgences that were being sold. I kind of
a little backdoor way. Yeah.
That's kind of
that's
what
interesting. Your mind went there. Yeah.
It went right there. And I know that was revised later, 16th century, but that's where my mind went, is you can't cheat your way in.
Yeah.
You can't buy your way in.
Yeah.
You have to be true and honest.
There is a way.
Yes.
Yep. And there are people who are trying to kind of get us to take shortcuts or whatever, or different routes. And basically saying, if you don't enter through the gate, you're a thief and a bandit.
Right.
And it's through the gate that you enter. And we talked about the notion that in biblical images, there are significant gates or doors in the Bible. And what I wanted to say, I wish I could go back and preach it again for a couple of reasons, but I wanted to emphasize that in all these images, there's just one way. And I didn't say that.
No, I think that came across.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah, because when you're, Noah's Ark, there's
one way.
Right, there's one way. The temple, one way. And when they're coming to you kind of described it, it wasn't the tabernacle, was it?
When they were going, there's the outer courtyard. So they entered the temple courts through one entrance.
Right.
And then the high priest went into the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement. All year long, people are making these small sacrifices for their own sins. And just in case one is missed, there's one day when the high priest is going to go make one sacrifice to atone for all of it. And so he takes the blood of an unblemished lamb and he brushes it on what's called the mercy seat, which is the lid of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes. And
so he would do that, but there's only one way in. There's not all these various ways into this Holy of Holies that is housing, quote unquote, the presence of God. God is in here. It's where God's hanging out. It's God's earthly dwelling place. There's only one way in.
And I think that's really how churches started. I mean, if you look at church architecture, then you know that it's usually laid out in a cross, and that the longest way is how you enter. And it's one door.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to emphasize that Jesus is saying, and for all of us to hear, if you want to have access to God and first of all, the rest that God has for you, there's one way. Anyone who's any other way that people are trying to access that, that's a thief or a bandit trying to kill, steal, and destroy, as he says in verse 10. And if you want access to the pasture where you are fed and there's provision and there's freedom in that pasture, there's one way to get there. There's a gate. And Jesus is saying, I'm that way. And what I have, one of my soapboxes, and I guess I can do it in a podcast, has been when the church has thought that's just not enough. We need to think about more ways and different ways. And what about this way? And hey, that's between God and humanity, and I'm going to let God sort that out. but the information that I have is that he's the way. And so when I preach, and again, I sometimes wonder if folks are like, oh Lord, he's talking about Jesus again. Oh, here we go, the cross again. But I see this as the culmination of this entire book, that it's all leading to who this Jesus Christ is.
Mm-hmm. And you said something a minute ago. You talked about freedom in following him and allowing him to be the gate. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the image that I used was from C.S. Lewis of the fish. So you take a fish, you say, okay, take it out of the water, put it on dry land, and say, all right, fish, here it is. You got this whole wide world, have at it. And the fish can't do anything but die. But when you put the fish in the fish's habitat, the fish is free to enjoy that habitat. I think God has created us for a certain life and designed us for a certain life. And when we are living in that context, in fact, that's one of our church members, John, said to me after the sermon, I'd really never thought about freedom within the appropriate context. And I believe that God says, when you are living in this context, which is living kind of according to my way and my design for you, when you're doing that, you are free. Right. You're free to enjoy that. You're free to have the peace that I intend for you and the flourishing and satisfaction. It's all there for you. Just enjoy it all. Right. But when you assert your own, quote, freedom and do your own thing, you're like the fish out of water, trying to live the life that God didn't design you for. And so for me, I think about, what is it that God has said, hey, here's the life that I want for you. And when I live that type of life, it's then that I really experience all this freedom and joy that God has for me.
Right. And that goes back to exactly what we were talking about at the beginning. This is not fist bump Jesus. There's freedom, but there's guardrails about how to live your best within that freedom. And important point not to lose.
That's right. You and I'm much more seasoned in terms of being old. I can think of many times in my life when I've asserted my own freedom and thought, hey, God loves me. I'm going to heaven. I'm going to do whatever I want to do on this side of heaven. And I have seen that lead to incredible regret in my life.
I've seen it kind of play in the opposite way in mine. So I think, in trusting God and trusting Jesus, there is a calmness that comes. And so you are freer to live your life without those concerns, because you know that a greater power is taking care of those things. Yep. And when you have that trust, I think that calmness leads to a freedom that I didn't have before.
It does for me too. What I'm saying is, I've had moments when I have thought, I'm just going to live life on my terms and not on God's terms and enjoy God's peace. And when I try to live it on my terms, that's when I'm just like, it's just not working.
Do you think it's intentional, though, is the question?
On whose part?
On your part. Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I've intentionally thought, I know this is not where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, just the idea, I know right now I'm that fish that's out of water. I'm not in the place where I'm supposed to be, but it's okay, because Jesus loves me. He's going to throw me back in the water.
Well, it's true, but also God tests us, right? Yeah. 40 days and 40 nights in the desert,
That's
right? So we're tested too. And I wonder if some of that, feeling like a fish out of water is some of that as well.
It reminds me I don't want to ever do that again.
Yes.
There have been, it just, again, the fatigue that comes with that, and the regret and the pit in the stomach and the
just... Why am I hearing something that involves margaritas? Multiple margaritas. That's what it sounds like.
It involves something similar. Yeah, tell us a little bit about these margaritas.
No, that's okay.
No, yeah, and I wasn't even thinking about physically, but just, well, this Sunday we're going to do our prayer of confession from Psalm 32, which we started to do in our invocation on Sunday. And David basically says, when I did not confess my sins to God, my body wasted away from groaning all night long.
Absolutely.
When I confessed my sins, when I started living according to God's freedom and God's way, then I experienced redemption. So we wrapped up talking about freedom, and one of the things I wanted to emphasize was, what does it look like to trust God to provide that freedom? What does trust look like? And I went down the road of trusting God in the small things. Because I think a lot of us, at least speaking for myself, it's easy to say, I'm going to trust God with this major decision. And the truth is, God wants to be trusted in all these decisions. And for me, it's always an accumulation of small decisions that lead to kind of greater ones for me. And so I'm thinking about small things I can trust God in. And the image that I used, I led a study recently with some pastors, was the Battle of Jericho. So in the Battle of Jericho in the Old Testament, Joshua is instructed by God, you're going to march around the walls of this fortified city, Jericho, and you're going to march around these walls for 6 days. And on the 7th day, you're going to blow the trumpets and the walls are going to come down. And what occurred to me was that leading up to that trumpet blast were a bunch of small steps, little steps every single day around the wall, 6 days. And then finally the big thing comes, and those small steps have led to that. I should have done that yesterday. You know why I didn't? I thought I was getting too long-winded.
No, I thought it was good.
Oh, you wouldn't. Would you say if you didn't?
Yeah, I would.
Okay,
you know me well enough to know I probably would.
Yeah. It just, because I was looking out there, and yesterday we didn't get out till almost noon. I like to get our folks out about 10 till.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of liturgy at the beginning because I wanted to give myself 25 solid minutes for this message.
These are important messages.
I know.
So it makes sense.
I know. I agree. But anyway,
that's what I was saying. I love that concept of literally every single small step, circumnavigating that city led to the big bang.
He could have said, just go there and blow your horns.
Right.
And make it, but instead he said, no, you need to obey me in small steps. And Jesus even said, you've been, in telling a parable, you've been faithful in a little, I will now give you much to be over. And so as I'm thinking about what it looks like to trust God, I'm asking myself, what are those small steps that are going to lead me into this pasture, into this freedom? What else you got?
Well, I'm just wondering. So
I know you are pondering, aren't you?
In your life, what are some small things or small ways you show trust in Christ?
For me, it is not purely. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is generosity. I know that God calls me to be generous. And when I think about generosity, I think about my time and my energy and my financial resources and the gifts that I have. And so yesterday, for example, I had an opportunity yesterday to not spend time with someone that I really needed to spend time with. And I was like, it's a small thing. And I could easily say to someone else, you handle this situation. And instead I said, I'm just going to give it an hour of my time. And it was a small thing, but I saw that as being a good steward of that resource. For me, that was an act of generosity. Because I was tired. I could have gone home and laid on the couch and watched golf.
Right.
Which I did later, by the way.
Oh, good,
still.
Good.
So yeah, what about you? What is a small step that you might take that is an example of your trusting God?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not saying it's all the time, because sometimes, life, of course, gets the better of me. But there have been recently, in the past couple of years, situations where in the past I would have been like, oh, why did that happen? Now I'm going to be late. And now I kind of look at it as, that's just when God wanted me to get there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of accepting that now, sometimes God is also telling me you need to be more on time.
Get up earlier.
Sometimes, yes, it's a lesson in humility and self-discipline. But just kind of trusting little things like that, little everyday things that kind of used to just hack me off, like, now we're going slow.
Nice.
Yeah, so those are the very little infinitesimal ways.
God is in those interruptions sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, so don't you ever think, maybe there was a car crash happening where, he wanted me to be 5 minutes late?
Yeah. You read stories about people who are like late for the airport.
You do. And they don't make the plane and then the plane crashes. Yeah.
So, well, we've done it.
We've done it all.
We have covered it. Any last words of wisdom for the good of our group listening?
No, I know you're excited about next week, though.
I really can't wait. In fact,
good.
I was I was waiting for you to get the microphones ready, starting to diagram a passage. And so I'm going to do John chapter 10, verses 11 through 18. I don't think I'm going to do 19 and 20. It doesn't support the message that I'm seeing. And starting to diagram this about what it means that he is our good shepherd. And we don't have to guess what that means because he tells us. So that's where we're headed next week.
All right.
All right. Well, hey, thank you to you, Jesse, and also to whoever's giving us 20 minutes of their day. How long has this taken?
25.
I've got to be more economical with
Well,
my
that's okay.
words.
You do have a pretty good internal timer for 20 minutes. You start wrapping it up around then.
Okay,
but
good.
we'll do better. We
We
promise,
will.
podcasters.
All right. Hey, you all have a wonderful week. You take good care. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Tuesday Huddle. If Sunday's message encouraged you, we invite you to watch the full service or explore more at walnuthillchurchky.org. Join us this week and next Sunday as we continue to grow together in faith.